When you think of the Civil War, what region of the U.S. do you think of? Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, maybe Vicksburg and Mississippi. But you probably don't think of the American Southwest. The Civil War in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona is a part of the war rarely remembered, and I seek to shed some light on it. As many of you may know, California was a state of the Union. California is not explored on usually in any scale in teachings about the Civil War. Just because California was a state in the Union did not mean that everyone in the state opposed slavery and the Confederacy. Several people, especially in Southern California, wanted the state to join the Confederacy and become a slave state. California state militias, which had members who supported both sides, were disbanded, and only pro-Union militias remained in the state. In response, Confederate sympathizers in Los Angeles created the Los Angeles Mounted Rifles. While the LA Mounted Rifles were never able to start a conflict or get Southern California into the Confederacy, and only really attempted to gather support amongst officers in the state, they did make some noise, and they caused the Union to pay more attention to secessionism in the West. Due to rising secessionism in California and Arizona, the creation of the California Column happened. The California Column was a combination of 10 Californian companies. It consisted of 5 companies of the 1st Regiment California Volunteer Cavalry, Company B of the 2nd Regiment California Volunteer Cavalry, and a light battery A of the 3rd United States Artillery. The column only had 1,500 soldiers, but according to Lieutenant George Pettus, they were well trained and disciplined. At around the same time, General Henry H. Sibley marched the Confederate Army under his command into Union-controlled New Mexico territory in February of 1862. This was done because Confederate sympathizers in New Mexico wanted Confederate troops to come in and take over the area. Sibley marched troops from West Texas along the Rio Grande. He planned to attack Fort Craig, but decided against it because he thought it would be too risky. Sibley had his army ford the Rio Grande at Valverde. Union scouts saw the Confederate troops moving toward the river and alerted Union troops at Fort Craig. When the first Confederate troops arrived at the ford, Union troops were already there blocking the way. Confederate troops took cover while they waited for reinforcements. The Union cavalry had the option to drive the Confederates from their position, but chose not to and refused to engage. The Confederates outnumbered the Union, but they had one problem. They had no long-range weapons. The Confederate troops were in the old riverbed of the Rio Grande, which served as a natural trench. The old riverbed was 300 yards away from the Union positions, and the bullets would fall to the ground before they could have a chance of hitting any Union soldier. The Confederate cannons also could not reach the Union ones. The Confederates refused to leave the riverbed, which gave the Union time to send almost all of their soldiers from Fort Craig to the ford. Small amounts of firing happened throughout the day. The Confederate reinforcements arrived by early afternoon, and had to act quickly because the troops were running out of water and time. To the far right of the Union lines were what the Confederates thought to be inexperienced local militia. Confederate lancers charged them in the hopes of breaking the line, but it turns out that they are experienced volunteers from Colorado. The Union was able to push back the charge without losing a single soldier or breaking the line. By 4, Union troops began to gain advantage and thus repositioned soldiers in preparation for an attack on the left portion of the Confederate line. This repositioning would weaken the Union center. One Confederate battalion attacked the Union right to stall the Union attack, but was pushed back, allowing the Union to advance. A battalion of 750 attacked the weakened Union center in 3 separate waves. Several Union soldiers retreated. The Union attempted to charge the Confederates with cavalry, but it did not do much, and the Union line broke and the Union raised the white flag. Apparently, this final push was largely motivated by the Confederates' need for water. Fort Craig had strong defenses, and as a result, it would not be taken over by the Confederacy. The Union refused to attack the Confederates again, and had a relatively unhindered route to northern New Mexico. The Confederates were dangerously low on supplies. The Union sent out a few soldiers with orders to go ahead of the Confederate forces and destroy all supplies along the Rio Grande. Confederate troops were able to acquire food and weapons from local militias that they defeated, which meant that despite several depots being raided and destroyed by the Union, the Confederates would have enough food and other supplies to make it to Albuquerque. A small group of Union militia defending Albuquerque were not able to stop the advancing Confederates. Union-supporting citizens looted lots of supplies, but many were retrievable. Sibley guessed that his army would have enough supplies for Albuquerque to make it for 3 more months. Sibley's troops marched further and took over Santa Fe with no resistance. Troops took time to rest before continuing north to Fort Union in northern New Mexico, which had been the goal of the campaign. Troops from Colorado were rushed to Fort Union to defend it. A few Union troops were sent out from Fort Union to raid and harass the Confederate troops. The Confederates caught word of this and sent out troops to stop them. The two armies met in Glorieta Pass. The Confederates were camped at Apache Canyon with a picket post of 50 at the summit of the pass. The Union troops were under the command of John M. Shivington. Shivington's troops reached the pass in the morning and encountered the picket post in the early afternoon. The picket post was easily destroyed, and the Union continued down the pass. Shivington's men were met with cannon fire. They were able to regroup and split off to either side of the pass. Shivington was able to flank the Confederate troops, causing them to retreat. Shivington then took his men to the nearby Kozlowski's ranch to rest and recuperate as both sides waited for reinforcements. Reinforcements arrived throughout the next day. Once all reinforcements arrived, the Union Army was 1,300 men strong, while the Confederates were 1,100 strong. But the next day, both armies decided to attack. Shivington expected that the Confederates would remain in Apache Canyon, and thus had his men go to the top of the pass to watch for Confederate movement. The Confederates did not do what the Union had expected, and instead advanced down the pass rapidly. When the main Union force learned of the rapid Confederate advance, they attacked them from Pigeon's Ranch. At first, the Union held their ground, but were eventually outflanked by the Confederates. The Union troops fled in confusion, but were able to reform positions on the ranch buildings. The Confederacy then launched a three-pronged attack, with two groups of Union soldiers attacking the Union left, and one attacking the right, and the remaining attacking the center. The attack on the left was beaten back, the one in the center stalled, and the Confederates attacking the right successfully outflanked the Union troops. The attack on the Union center would end up being a success for the Confederacy, and as a result, the Union line moved to an area east of Pigeon's Ranch. Small amounts of fighting occurred throughout the rest of the day before the Union eventually retreated back to Kozlowski's ranch. The Confederates planned an advance but ran out of supplies and were forced to retreat back to Santa Fe. While the Battle of Glorieta Pass was technically a Confederate victory, it was also a turning point for the war for the Union. It showed that the Confederacy would never have enough supplies to maintain an occupation of New Mexico. Sibley's troops would slowly retreat back to Texas. At almost that exact same time, the California column was almost ready to send troops out to secure control of Arizona and New Mexico. The first ever battle that the California column took part in was the Battle of Stanwix Station. A small detachment of California column soldiers went to check on Stanwix Station, a small post with animals that the column would use. When the troops arrived, they found a small group of Confederate soldiers burning hay. Those soldiers were led by Jack Swilling, as in that Jack Swilling, founder of Phoenix, Arizona. The Union troops fired on Swilling's battalion, and the Confederate soldiers retreated to Tucson. This battle would also be the westernmost in the Civil War. The entirety of the California column would begin their march of April 1862 with the goal of reaching Texas. The vast majority of the march would be in the dry desert. As you can assume, the soldiers would be prone to dehydration. The column would avoid dehydration by splitting the soldiers up into small detachments to preserve water. This would be successful. The Battle of Stanwix Station led to the main Confederate command in Tucson, warning about the Union march, and they planted small groups of soldiers along the march route to combat the Union. A second battle occurred when a small detachment of Union cavalry spotted a group of Confederate soldiers, this time not being led by the future founder of a major city. The detachment was meant to wait for reinforcements before they engaged the enemy, but the cavalrymen refused to listen and attacked. The attack was successful and the Confederate troops retreated. This battle would be known as the Battle of Picacho Peak. The column continued to march into the summer. The Confederates were not the only opponents. An alliance of Apache tribes formed with the goal of driving the Union out of Arizona. There would be one major attack by the Apache on July 15th. 500 Apaches attacked a small group of Union soldiers. Union forces retreated but then regrouped and attacked the Apache with artillery, causing them to retreat. The California column faced almost no opposition along their way to the Rio Grande, and once they reached the river, the Confederate soldiers had retreated. The column would then take over the El Paso area, and after that would only be used to defend against small Apache attacks until they were disbanded in the summer of 1864. In the rest of the West, there were no major battles with the Confederacy. During the war, the Union still maintained forts in the West, but most of them only defended against Native American attacks and watched over settlers coming to the West. States and territories did supply manpower to the mainstream Union armies fighting in the South. While the Civil War in the West played a much smaller role than the South, it is still something important to be remembered. I hope you enjoyed this video.